It was my first Boxing Day game, and when I came on the pitch, I was just like, "Oh my God!" It was amazing. I never saw so many supporters for a away game, but we know that we have the best supporters in the England. I don't know if I can say that, but in the northeast for sure.
Hello and welcome to Black Cats Chat, the Sunderland AFC International Fans Podcast. My name is Lee Thirkell. I'm from the Bilbao Black Cats, and today I'm joined by two new guests. This time we've got a SAFC NASA takeover. We've got Jonathan Williams, who is in Edmonton in Canada. Good morning to you, Jonathan, where you are.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Lovely, mate. Pleasure. And we've also got Max Gadd, who's another member of NASA, and he's in Denver, Colorado. Good morning to you, Max.
Good morning. Awesome to be here.
Thanks so much for coming on. So we just watched 2-2 draw Sunderland and Blackburn in front of 7,000 fans, away fans at the Ewood Park. Brilliant effort from the fans on Boxing Day. But the players couldn't get it over the line. We conceded an 89th minute goal. But we're going to get into that shortly. As always, when we have new guests, we like to hear their Sunderland stories. So, Max, would you like to start us off, please?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I fell in love with the club the 2015-2016 season where we stayed up with Big Sam. I was getting more into English soccer and less into American football. I needed a team. I didn't want to root for what I call the Big Six, the big three London teams, the Manchester teams, Liverpool. That's who it feels like everybody supports here in the States. And I stumbled into the 3-2 game against Chelsea, and I think it was early May of 2016. Home game, two terrific late goals, Barini and Defoe. Incredible atmosphere. The fans go crazy. Just a really entertaining game, seeing Big Sam go nuts and the fans go nuts. And I find myself saying, boy, this club feels like there's something special going on. This must have been a pretty important win. Maybe they're playing for Champions League or Europa League. And sure enough, they show the table, and it was to get us out of the relegation zone into 17th. So I found myself saying, God, if these fans can be so passionate to be 17th, what must it be like if they're doing better or higher? Football in the Northeast really feels like it means something more. It's easy to be a casual fan, a glory hunter, a Man United fan, but it's not so easy to root for the other teams. So really fell in love with the passion of the club, the passion of the fan base. Watched them beat Everton 3-0 the next week, kept us up, sent Newcastle down. And that sort of started my love affair with the club. We were, of course, relegated the next two seasons, which I think I put about 40% on my fault for adopting the team. I was the dark cloud. But I have stayed with the club ever since. NASA does a fantastic job here of keeping everyone informed, keeping everyone together. Had a great chance to go down to New Mexico and watch the team last year. That was one of the best memories of my life. My dad flew in from LA and getting a chance to meet some of the players, the ownership, the other NASA fans. So for me, it was really about the culture of the club, the culture of the fans, and the just the feeling that in the Northeast football means more. So really happy to be here, really happy to be part of this club.
Yeah, it's a common theme, isn't it? That the fans, the identity, and the culture that the club has, and the fans and the following what you have. A lot of fans like yourself have said that that's the reason why. Is it just Sunderland is a unique club, or are we just being, I don't know, with like rose tinted glasses and we think everything's the best because it's our club? I mean, from your point of view, would you say like I know like a top six club would say the same?
That's a great question. And I mean, from my perspective, I just feel like the top six clubs, the big six, have a lot more casual fans from, at least in the States. It's a lot more of casual. Yeah, I kind of keep an eye on the team. But the NASA supporters here, it feels like everybody's watching every game and we're all live chatting every game. I'm totally biased, but it feels like there is more of a connection with this club. Maybe because of that, because they've struggled so much in the last few years, and it's easy to root for teams that are successful. I think you're a little bit more emotionally invested in teams that have to scrap out of League One and work hard for every point, work hard for every win, and don't have a $500 million transfer budget.
Yeah. And you mentioned there that you went to the American tour a couple of years ago. Have you been over to England yet to see a match, or is it on the
Never.
bucket? Is it on the bucket list?
It is on the bucket list. I'm targeting a chance to go either next year or the year after. So I've never been to the Stadium of Light. I can't wait to go. It's absolutely a bucket list trip.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the club will welcome you with open arms and they'll put on a good show for you. All right, that's brilliant, Max. Thank you for that. Jonathan, now it's your turn. Now, you're not a stranger to podcasts, are you?
No, no, I have my own podcast I run, but it's a little different. It's a Welsh history podcast, so it's a little different than this, needless to say. But my Sunderland history is a little different as well because I moved to the UK in 1999, and while I was there, I kind of got invested into football because of the uh, obviously the culture over there and how excited everybody was. And at the time, it was when Man U was hugely popular and hugely successful. And as per usual with these things, I kind of wanted to pick a team because I wanted to be able to, have conversations with people and actually understand what they were talking about. And as it turned out, Sunderland had just got into the Premier League at the time, and this was with Phillips and Niall Quinn.
Yep.
So this was the glory days as I look at it now. But they, and I think at the time I was really starting to follow it. They had just gotten towards, I think they were in the top six because this was the brief glory period where they were held on to the top six till Christmas that year.
Yeah, I think we finished seventh 2 seasons in a row, didn't we? Yeah.
Yep, with Peter Reid. And that was when I picked them, basically. I didn't live anywhere near them, and that was also one of the reasons. Because living in Cardiff at the time, I was a little nervous of the local fan base being a little weird, and not to be impolite towards Cardiff City fans, but they can be a little ruffian, or at least they were then. And so I didn't want to pick a local team. I didn't want to get into conflict with people. And Sunderland just happens to wear the exact same combination of colors as I wore as a kid when I was with my soccer team then. So it kind of worked out really well. And they were exciting to watch at the time. And they had gotten up and all of a sudden were in the top. So it was fun to follow. I mean, obviously didn't see much of their actual games, but and I've never been to a game in person, either on tour or anywhere else, because they don't come anywhere near here. But it is something I've wanted to do for a while, just haven't got around to it yet.
Yeah, and I'm sure one day it'll happen. But yeah, it's very curious that living in Cardiff and then you end up supporting Sunderland. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not
It
exactly
was,
close. Yeah.
no, and that was actually, I mean, that was part of the reason. The only time I was ever heckled for wearing a kit was by I think it was a Charlton fan as they were driving by one time, because they just beat us in the league. And that was it. That was the only time anybody ever mentioned it. So I always thought that was pretty successful,
Yeah.
Um,
And anyway, you guys are both part of the SFC NASA branch. It's a large group. We have a lot of members who come on here as well. It does really sound like a nice community to be a part of, even though the distances aren't exactly close. You all seem to have like a good relationship with each other. Is that important for you to be part of this group and part of this culture?
Without question. It was a real game changer for me. I mean, when you're a Sunderland fan in Denver, I'm not going downtown to the soccer bar and getting the Sunderland League One game put on there. There isn't much of a sense of connection, especially if you're not a Premier League team, at least locally. There doesn't seem like there's that much of a presence. So the idea of having this community of close-knit folks from all over North America and being able to chat about the games and give your opinions and watch the games together, I think is really great. It's really heartwarming.
Mm-hmm. All right, brilliant, guys. Thank you very much for that. Right, we'll go on to the game then. Jonathan, 2-2 against Blackburn. I mean, before the match, we would have settled for a point, right?
mhm. Yeah. It feels like a point lost, though. It feels like they started again in that kind of we're not really here yet mode, which drives me crazy. I wish they would stop doing that because then they spend normally they spend the rest of the second half trying to come back to it. Today they didn't. And then that goal at the end was super frustrating, but they let off the gas a bit. I think maybe they were just tired, but Labrice doesn't seem to like to make changes, which I think is part of the problem. I think if he brought on a few players there, it might have helped the energy of the team at the end and maybe put a stop to some of what was going on. But yeah, I don't know. It was funny though, listening to the broadcast and watching it and seeing how much you could hear Sunderland supporters over the Blackpool supporters for
Yeah.
most of the game, which was quite amusing.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, we had the whole stand behind the goal, didn't we?
Yep.
Max, is it going to become a concern, do you think, about this slow start and conceding and always coming back and chasing the game? Because it's happened, what, 4 or 5 times in a row now?
I think six even. It's certainly frustrating to see them get off the bus physically, but not mentally. I'm okay with going down 1-0 if you're going to be winning these games 2-1, 3-2, the Swansea game. But it's certainly tough to win games when you come out in a hole like that and have to mentally kind of dig yourselves out of it. So yeah, totally frustrating.
What would you put it down to then, Max? Why would you think that we're making these slow starts? Because at the start of the season we weren't. We were beating what? We beat Portsmouth 3-0 away. We beat Sheffield United 4-0 at home. But then now it just seems that we're grinding out results, which is not a bad thing, but there is like a bit of lack of quality, lack of energy in the first half.
Yeah, I think that's the $64,000 question because RLB does a great job at halftime making adjustments. I mean, the last few games, just seeing us come out firing at halftime. So whatever he says at halftime works, but whatever he's saying at the beginning of the games doesn't appear to be working. So if you have the answer to that question, Lee, I'd love to hear it, but I can't figure out why we're coming out so sloppy and so slow. I'm okay with it if we're going to turn around and win games, but I just don't have the answer to it.
Yeah, well, Jonathan, on the last episode of the podcast, Chris in Brisbane mentioned that he just seems that we seem to be waiting to see what the other teams are going to do before reacting to it. But by that time, we're already a goal down. Would you agree with
Yeah,
that?
I would to some extent, although I will say today, yeah, I think most of the problem seemed to revolve around their passing. Like their first half passing was awful. And every time they got in trouble, it was because there was a bad pass at some point, and then somebody ran it back and they counterattacked, and we just had no answer to it to really deal with it. And then we didn't counterattack back. So a lot of the passes went nowhere. They went right to the opposition, or they were just passes into space for no reason. Like I don't quite understand what's going on with that and why that's happening as frequently as it is. Is it because like I've been wondering if having Mundell injured has really hurt the team a lot because he seemed to be the guy who carried the ball most of the time,
Hmm.
and whether or not not having him there is kind of a detriment to their ability to move forward. I don't really know because they're still doing it. So, but then Job was almost invisible for most of the game too. So I don't know. I don't know what the problems are exactly, but certainly passing is the thing I would point to the most. And I wonder if that's something they're looking at next month as kind of a way to change up the squad a bit, get a couple of people in who can carry the ball better. I wonder if Roberts is on examination because he didn't look very good to me, which is a little disconcerting if if your right hand can't do what your left hand's doing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I look at it, at least looking at the game as a whole.
Hmm.
Their passing was abysmal. It's a team they should be beating. There's no excuse really for it. And they lost points, and worse yet, had an opportunity to get into second place or at least be right there beside them for first because, of course, Sheffield United lost.
Yeah.
So,
Could have closed the gap.
yeah. So all of those things, you lose them just by letting that goal in at the end.
Well, and then also like Middlesbrough, didn't they throw a 3-0 lead away against Sheffield Wednesday as well? So
Yeah, because
Correct.
they got a man set off in the middle of the game too, which is part of
yeah,
the problem, I think. But
yeah.
yeah, no, just
Um,
awful.
but anyway, Max, at the start of the season, then we used to play with this kind of high energy press, but a lot of that recently just seems to have died down, and we seem to be kind of like more relaxed. Like,
Yeah, I totally agree. I'd love to know what the thought process is behind it because obviously when we were starting out the high press, we were winning a lot more games, and now our win percentage in the last 10 games has gone down dramatically. I don't know if part of that is RLB making his own adjustments. I don't know if teams have now kind of figured out RLB's style. You know, when you get a new manager coming from somewhere else in Europe, maybe it takes time to kind of look at the game film and scout him out. But I have noticed that change. I can't say if it's the reason that we're not winning games. I still feel like the reason we're not winning games is we give up crappy goals. We give up a lot of bad bounces and we give up a lot of goals at bad times.
yeah, and I think another thing is that when we do try and do the press, it doesn't seem to have any cohesion between
Right.
the players
Mhm.
that are doing it. Just like some are doing it and some aren't, and then it's just easy for the opposition to get out. But anyway, Jonathan, on the 13th minute, then poor defending, bit of pinball, and what do you know? Blackburn score a goal. What did you make of that first goal that went in?
Well, it just, as you said, poor all around everything. Like the defending was awful. The movement of the ball was awful to get us in that place in the first place. A lot of just bad habits it felt like were creeping in, and I don't know, they just seemed like they were not ready for the game, which I don't understand. Now, whether I was saying on social media, whether that's because people are starting to study us and know that the first few minutes of the game are a great time to get after us because we're not quick
Mm.
and not getting on the ball quick enough. Whether that's what's going on, I don't know. But yeah, it's incredibly frustrating to watch them just let an easy one effectively in because, as you say, it pinballed around. There was no real, just defensively, they looked out of sorts with the exception of Methan.
Yeah,
The entire defense kind of looked baffled at times by what was going on, which is incredibly frustrating because they shouldn't be doing that. Not at this point in the season. They should have it fairly figured out. It's been their mostly the same group for most of the season too. So
yeah, it's been basically pretty much the same, what, 5, 6 players rotating, hasn't it?
mhm.
But anyway, Max, on that goal, then, I mean, I looked back at the replay of the goal, and it started off in the middle of the pitch where one of their players picked up the ball and he just like breezed past two of our players. It was so easy to get past them. I was thinking, like, you got to make a foul there, a tactical foul, because if there's two players and you're just letting one guy run through, that's pretty poor, isn't it?
Lee, it feels like the kind of goal that we've seen given up far too many times this year. Just kind of sloppy, careless defending in the midfield, and then the pinball, we get the bad bounce, and it ends up right at one of their attackers, 2 feet from the goal line, and Pato can't do anything about it.
Yeah. And well, that was like the first half pretty much summed up, wasn't it? Because the first half we had no shots on target at all. And probably the most exciting thing that happened in the first half was seeing Jude Bellingham in the stands singing the singing the Shearer is a wanker song. So that was probably the best moment of the first half. But then, uh, as we've seen in recent games, Jonathan, the second half when we've gone a goal behind, we do seem to pick it up. Uh, is it just Lebris telling the lads, listen, we've got to get more energy, move the ball faster, and we've also got 7,000 angry fans there.
Mm.
Do you think that's probably the team talk at halftime?
I mean, the suggestion was on the broadcast that he'd yell at them quite a bit, but I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's more a case of him just coming in and saying, "Look, here's the mistakes we're making. Here's the things we need to improve quickly." It's hard to know really because I don't know him well enough as a manager to know kind of his methodology. He's so quiet normally, you really don't pick up on, anybody who's quiet in public may be absolutely a yeller in private, shall we say.
Yeah,
But from my aspect of things, what I don't understand is how come he can do that at halftime, but he doesn't do that at the beginning of the game. That's what I don't understand.
yeah,
Because like you've seen this story before, it shouldn't be that hard to kind of correct. But the when you look at what they did in the start of the second half, it was like a whole new team. Everything was going right. Their passing was smooth. They were getting in there and making plays. They were doing things that they weren't doing at all in the previous. Like it's just so weird that they're like that. It's frustrating.
yeah.
But
Well, there was a nervy moment, wasn't there, Max, at the start of the second half in the first 15 seconds when
mm,
Blackburn could have got a second, and that probably would have been game over. But after that, we did pick it up. Chris Rigg got the equaliser on 50 minutes, and I think in that 5 minute period, we probably did deserve to get the equaliser, didn't we?
We were flying, and like Jonathan said, the passing was a lot better. I thought Riggy had a really well-timed run into the box, a composed finish. We're just used to seeing it from him.
Yeah, and I think it was a very good play from Robertson and Hume down the right hand side. I think it was Hume or Daniel was maybe it's Daniel, I can't remember. Um, but yeah, and you mentioned before, Jonathan, that you're not a fan of Roberts recently, but I thought today he had a better game. He looked more creative, a little bit more of a threat than Mayendo on the other side, and he
mm.
was involved in both goals.
Yeah, it's the difficulty sometimes with these players is that sometimes they can look really kind of meh, to use a modern term. And then all of a sudden they'll have brilliance out of nothing. Like Isidor kind of did that too with his goal. Like it came out of nowhere. Um, as far as he'd been concerned, because he'd not done much before that. But it, I guess what I have a bit of recency bias with Roberts because the latter half of it felt like he was doing nothing. So that's probably where this belief of mine comes from, is that I was like, how come whenever you get the ball, it dies, buddy? Because every time he's coming up with it, he'd get knocked off the ball really fast, and it threw me up. And I think that's what's in the back of my head is like, okay, well, this is frustrating. But I think that's what everybody goes through. It's like you watch a certain player and you see them make mistakes, and it suddenly exemplifies it. Like, I know there are a lot of people that call on Dan Neil for being problematic, and yet I thought he had the best game of the group.
Yeah.
So,
Agreed.
you know,
Yeah, I'm going to get onto Daniel later as well. But then, anyway, Rigg marks that goal. That was his first goal, I believe, since the Middlesbrough flick, I think it was.
Right.
And that's the thing, is that we need to see him get into those areas more often.
I totally agree. He's certainly got the capability. That injury did not look good coming off, and I truly hope that he can get back out soon, particularly with so many games that we have over the next couple of weeks. But I do agree that we want to see Riggy more of a box-to-box midfielder, and I think he's capable of scoring goals just as well as Mayendo Roberts or some of the frontline guys.
Yeah, and then on the 55th minute, complete turnaround, Jonathan. Was it Dan Neil past to Roberts on the right-hand side, who drives down the right, plays it into Isidor, who does like a little deft little back heel into the corner, cool as you like. 2-1, and everything's rosy, isn't it?
yeah, and it's exactly why Isidore can do amazing things at the drop of a hat. Like it's the kind of goal where you're just like, huh, how'd that go in? But it's such I wouldn't say typical of him, but kind of that's the kind of thing he can do when he wants to, which is something we really haven't had for a while on our strikers. So it's what he brings that I think makes him so special and makes him useful to us. Where, no disrespect to the previous ones recently, but it's been a while since we've had somebody that can do that consistently. And I know he's had a bit of a downtime last little bit, but compared to some of the others, it's hard to balance those two and say, or balance Isidore and say he's somehow, not good enough. But at the same time, you look at the previous couple of years where we've had kind of makeshift setups at striker, it's hard to argue that he's not a much better situation than we've had in the past.
I think sometimes with Isidore is that we don't play to his strengths. I mean, for
Mm.
me, it looks a lot of the time we try to play him to his feet with his back to goal, and I don't think he's very comfortable at that. I think he likes to basically to get in the box, get on the front post, or he likes to make runs in behind the defenders. And we saw today, with the goal, that's how we got the goal. And there was also times when he got balls played through that's his style. But if we play to his feet and with his back to goal, he's not very good. It's a bit like, it reminds me of the League One days and having Charlie Wyke then. You know what I mean? As soon as you find like a way to play for them, you can get the best out of them. But yeah, Max, we touched on Dan Neil before. The pass that he played to Roberts for that goal was very good vision, wasn't it? Like quick thinking, good vision, and
Yep,
he was
terrific touch.
driving us forward all the time, wasn't he?
Terrific touch. I think Dan was the best player on the field, not only the best player for us, but I thought he was the best player on the field today. Just a great touch and great vision and great ball out to Roberts for that second goal.
Yeah, but doesn't that kind of sum things up recently that in the last four matches, Dan Neil has probably been the best player on the pitch in the last three out of four, but he's also our defensive midfield player.
I agree. He's taken a lot of slack and a lot of crap online this year for how he's played. But I do agree with you that at least the last 3 or 4 games, he's been the player of the team. I wouldn't go so far as to say he's the player of the season,
Mm.
but I do think it says a lot for him that a defensive midfielder can control the game the way he does.
Yeah, and it also shows that how far we've gone a little bit back, no, from those attacking days at the
Right.
start of the season, and now we're playing a bit more defensive.
Right.
So then, Jonathan, uh, for me, one of the pivotal moments, if we'd have held on to the result, to the 2-1 win, was the Chris Mepham block on 80 minutes when basically they had a free shot on goal and there's Mepham through his body. That's good to see, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely something that you want your defenders to be able to do and help clean up when things are kind of getting a little crazy. Uh, it's unfortunate that it kind of didn't continue after that, but it would have been, it was a spectacular play, let's be honest. So yeah, and you want to see, I would like to see more of it from the rest of them. It's one of my concerns with the defense. It's like what are you guys doing when stuff's coming down? How are you pushing the ball away from the front of the net? Like set pieces have been kind of stretched. For me, they looked a little difficult for the team, and that seems to be where some of the goals are going in. And I wonder if it's a positioning thing or what it is, defensively that they're not doing that's allowing them to get these chances on goal, which are getting us exposed. But Methven definitely was another. I mean, out of the rest of the team, I think he's like second best out of the team this today, at least in his play and how much he's contributed to trying keeping us level or take the lead, as the case may be. So yeah,
Yeah,
he's definitely been a key defender for us.
absolutely. And Max, we mentioned before about Isidor and his style of play. He created a great chance for Job, didn't he? Just after that, I think it was when he basically got in behind, went on a run, pulled it behind the Job, and he'll be kicking himself that he hasn't hit the target from there, right? With so much space and time.
I mean, Wilson did a great job of kind of holding the ball up better. It's easy as a striker to come in and try to score a lot. It's not as easy to go for great assists. I thought he set up a great chance for Job. And yeah, maybe that could or should have gone in. I thought Mayenda's chance at the end of the game was a much better opportunity. But like Jonathan said, I think Wilson really has been a revelation this year. Of course, you want strikers to score a goal a game, and he hasn't done that yet, but he's certainly been more competent at really everything in any striker that we've had, I think, in the last year and a half.
Yeah, and I think definitely, well, Jude Bellingham's got a contender for funniest moment of the match when in the second half, Luke O'Nien got a yellow card for a foul. Then he claimed to have won the ball when he got nowhere near it. But I mean, listen, I think that was like a tactical foul, wasn't it, Jonathan? And
Oh
I,
yeah, I think I mean, on the broadcast, they kind of acted like it wasn't necessary. I kind of thought it was actually, if you looked at it, because then it's one on goal. And I think it was a good play. I think it was obvious it was a foul. And I don't know why he was insisting so much, but it was kind of ironic. But I don't know whether it was that or whether it was Jude's face in the crowd when they had one of the cameras on him. And he's just like,
yeah.
halfway through the game when they're down, and he just looked like he was appalled by the whole thing. It was just so funny.
I think
But
that's how we felt in the first half, isn't it?
mhm, mhm.
Right then. So Chris Rigg suffered an injury. It looked like his ankle, I think, Max. It probably didn't help that it was like it looked like a very cold day, didn't it, in Blackburn? Uh, Hopefully it's just like a little twisted ankle and nothing more, and it'll be a couple of weeks on the sidelines. But if it's something worse, like Tommy Watson had like ankle ligaments, then could be looking for a couple of months.
Lee, it looked worse than 1 to 2 weeks. Knock on wood, it's not even that. But
Yeah.
he did not look good coming off the pitch.
Yeah. So in that case, like Aushish came on, uh, didn't have really time to get into game, but would you think he'll start against Stoke on Sunday?
In place of Rigg, probably, unless they want to put, was it
Alex
Harrison Jones or
Harrison Jones or
Alexic?
Alexic, yeah.
I can't remember if Poveda can play in that spot too, or where he's at, but I think Oshish, more than anyone else that I can think of, has done enough in the last 3 or 4 games to earn that starting spot.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then on the 89th minute, Jonathan, tragedy struck when Blackburn scored the goal. Pinball again. A decent effort from Patterson to get a hand to it, but he couldn't push it over the bar. I don't think we can complain. I think Blackburn probably deserved at least a point, would you say?
I think based on what they've done, yeah, it's we controlled so much of the game in the second half. It's hard to say that they deserved it, but at the same time, conversely, they controlled much of the first half. So I think for their effort, they deserved it. But I think from a standpoint of a fan, I don't know if they did. But yeah, and again, set piece issue. I think we got kind of a little swamped in there at that moment. But I think I don't fault Patterson, like you say, I don't fault Patterson for the way that went in. That's just the luck of the draw sometimes with the way these things work when you got set pieces. But Yeah, that's kind of my thought process on it. It's a bit frustrating, but it's better that than a loss, I guess, which initially you kind of feared that's where they were going.
Mm.
So, so that's, I guess, my comparison there just on based on it. And I mean, if you think about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, that would have been a loss. That's the kind of game we just lose. And it would be incredibly frustrating. And you'd be left kind of going, that was such a game we should have had and we didn't have, blah, 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 blah. But especially this year, it's just felt different. So that's why you're kind of more frustrated by it because it's felt like they should have these games and they should be winning them. And I think that's a sign that the team's doing better, which is good. And that's what you want to have out of the team. But it does lead you to being frustrated when they draw consistently.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Reminds us of Jack Ross at time, doesn't it?
mhm.
Right, Max. About what was it? 2 minutes later, 3 minutes later, Wilson Isidor just plays like a long ball upfield. Mayenda gets on the end of it. He's 1-on-1. You're thinking, come on, we're going to get a smash and grab here. We're going to get 3-2 win. And I've watched it back and I have no idea what he was trying to do.
Lee, you said that you thought this is going to be a smash and grab 3-2. I thought that too until I saw it was Mayenda, and I said he's not even going to come close. And listen, I don't like to slog off on guys. I'm sure he's trying his hardest. To not even get a shot off in that situation is unforgivable. It looked like he couldn't tell whether or not he wanted to shoot or go around. Either way, you got to pick one, and you got to put that game away.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, the obvious thing to do in that situation would be to go around the keeper.
Right.
Mhm.
Because especially with his speed, if he's flying at the goalkeeper and the goalkeeper's flying out, you knock it past the keeper, you're going to get on the end of it, no problem. With his speed, and in the end, he just does nothing. He just runs into the keeper, and for me, that kind of summed up his afternoon. I mean, I've always been saying about Mayenda that I think there's a talent there. It's just that he lacks some serious self-confidence. Because he's a big lad. He's what 19, 20 years old. He's a big lad. He's got a lot of speed, but he just seems too scared to use it. Would you agree with that, Jonathan?
Yeah, and I think if you look at that incident, it kind of shows that his decision making is a bit suspect when it comes to that kind of second, split second decision. You got to be able to, you can't halt between I'm going to go around or I'm going to dink it over. You got to do one of the two.
Yeah, well, it's
And
like lack of composure as well, isn't it? Isn't that? And that's
mhm,
important as a striker. You need that
yep,
composure.
absolutely. And when you're in that position, you gotta do it. Like both you and Max have said, you've got to take that shot. You can't just sit there and do nothing. And you did nothing, and you probably cost him a point in the process. So, or 2 points, I guess I should say, in the process. So
Yeah,
it's even more frustrating in that situation.
yeah. I thought he wasn't great today. I thought he's poor holding the ball up. He was getting knocked off the ball. His
Mhm.
first touch wasn't great. But I mean, listen, it's one game. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Well, we didn't have not just one chance, Max, but we also had another chance because Patrick Roberts had a shot, what we've become used to from Paddy. Like he gets into a good position, he shoots, and it either goes just over the bar or it gets saved. That would have been nice, wouldn't it, if he'd have got that?
Kind of his theme of the season. He really hasn't been the same since Ahmad kind of left, and I think he's still trying to find that magic. He did a great job cutting inside. He did a great job getting the shot off. But the difference between the teams that go up in the autos and get stuck in the playoff places is scoring those kinds of goals.
Yeah. Uh, Jonathan, a recurring theme, and we touched on it before at the start of the pod. Regis Lebris doesn't like to make subs.
Yeah.
I think we needed subs today around 73, 74 minutes.
Yep.
I think Blackburn made 3 or 4 subs to freshen it up. And I think realistically that's what got them the point, like those fresh legs.
Yeah, I think the fact that they were that the Sunderland uh, defense and off and midfielders were on, and I think there could have been changes made there specifically that may have brought on a couple, even if it's just shifting a couple people around, changing a couple people out in key spots, just to kind of, as you say, freshen up the side and have you able to react better because that's what it felt like as they started to slow down on reaction, and that's kind of what led to the problems. And if you don't kind of gather that in and kind of change momentum, get some fresh legs out, move it out a bit, try and maybe encourage the boys to get forward a bit more. Maybe that doesn't happen, but it's hard to say for sure. But I know the fan base has mentioned this business of him not making changes as being something of a concern. And I think watching today, that was definitely, that could have had a big influence on why we lost points.
Yeah. Well, we've got a couple of minutes left, guys. So on Sunday, we travelled to Stoke. We beat them a few weeks ago. I think, was it 2-1 we beat them a few weeks ago? And we got them again. It looks like, yeah, our Shearer is probably going to come in for Rigg. Max, what would your prediction be for Sunday?
I'll take 2-1 to Sunderland.
Yeah, 2-1. We'll take that, certainly. Jonathan?
I'm going to go 3-1. I think home game, they'll be up for it.
It's
is it away? I got it the wrong way around.
The FA Cup is home.
Yeah,
that's home.
Never mind, but I still think it'll be 3-1.
3-1. Well, fingers crossed. Well, we currently sit fourth place with 44 points. Leeds are in front of us by a point, 45, but they've got a game in hand. I think they play tonight or tomorrow. And then Burnley, who beat Sheffield United, they're in second, 47 points. And Sheffield United on 48 points. So it is very tight up there. We have got a 6-point gap to Blackburn, who are in fifth, but they've also got a game in hand. But yeah, I think it would be very frustrating for us to lose a playoff spot at this point of the season, wouldn't it? If we're looking back now and think we were first and we were 5 points clear, and then, well, we'll see how it goes. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure. Welcome to the podcast. Would love to have you on in the future. Hope you had a good Christmas and a happy New Year. And how are the lads?
Thank you. See you later.
Hello, I'm Ian and I'm 12 years old. I live in Vitoria-Gasteiz, Spain, and I'm a Bilbao Black Cats member. I've been a Sunderland supporter since I was a baby. How are the lads?